I'm Daniel, a 29-year-old man living in Chicago, and until 5 years ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I had been with my fiancée Sarah since our sophomore year at Northwestern University. We met in an economics class, and from the first conversation, I knew she was special. She had this infectious laugh that could light up any room, and her ambition matched mine perfectly. For nearly 5 years, we built what I believed was an unshakable relationship. We moved to Chicago together after graduation, got an apartment in Lincoln Park, and started our careers, me in financial consulting at Bridgewater Consulting, her in marketing at a tech startup called Vertex Innovations. Every morning, I'd wake up grateful that she chose me. I'd make us coffee, we'd talk about our dreams of starting a family someday, maybe buying a house in Evanston near the lake. Our life together had a rhythm that felt right. Saturday mornings at the Daily Grind coffee shop in Wicker Park, where we'd spend hours reading newspapers and planning our future. Sunday dinners with my family at my parents' house in Oak Park, where my mother Patricia would cook her famous lasagna, and my father James would quiz us about our career progress. My younger brother Ethan was always there too, 27 years old and still figuring out his path. He'd recently quit another job, and I'd been helping him network, introducing him to contacts at various firms around the city. Sarah and Ethan got along wonderfully, which made me happy. I loved that my future wife connected so well with my family, especially with my brother. They'd joke around, talk about movies and music, and sometimes grab coffee together when I was traveling for work. It felt like we were all becoming one big, happy family unit. But looking back now, there were signs I ignored. Small things that nagged at the back of my mind, whispers of doubt I constantly pushed away because acknowledging them felt like a betrayal of trust. The first incident happened about 8 months before the engagement. I had been on a business trip to Milwaukee, meeting with clients from a manufacturing company that was considering our consulting services. The meetings wrapped up early, around 2 p.m. on a Thursday, and I decided to surprise Sarah by coming home a day early. I'd been gone for 3 days and missed her terribly. When I walked through our apartment door, Sarah was sitting on the couch with her laptop, but she jumped at the sound of my entrance. Her hands flew to close the laptop screen, and her face flushed red. "Daniel, you're home early," she said, her voice an octave higher than normal. Ethan was there too, standing by the kitchen counter with a coffee mug in his hand. He seemed equally startled, fumbling with his phone and nearly dropping it. "Hey brother, didn't expect you back until tomorrow." "Yeah, finished early," I said, walking over to kiss Sarah. She kissed me back, but there was something stiff about it. "What are you guys up to?" "Oh, just planning your birthday surprise," Sarah said quickly, smiling that beautiful smile that usually melted my concerns away. "Ethan's been helping me brainstorm ideas." "My birthday's not for 2 months," I laughed. "Well, you know me," she said, running her fingers through her hair, a nervous gesture I'd seen before. "I like to plan ahead." Ethan nodded vigorously. "Yeah, we're thinking something big this year. But you can't know yet, so—" He trailed off, gesturing toward the door. Something felt off. The energy in the room was wrong, charged with a tension I couldn't quite name. But these were the 2 people I trusted most in the world. What was I supposed to think? That they were having an affair? The thought felt absurd, almost insulting to both of them, and to myself for even considering it. I pushed the feeling down and suggested we all go out for dinner to celebrate my early return. Throughout the meal at our favorite Italian restaurant in River North, I watched them interact. Sarah laughed at Ethan's jokes, maybe a little too enthusiastically. Their eyes met across the table a few times with what seemed like shared understanding. But siblings-in-law to be developed their own rapport, right? That was normal. Healthy even. The second incident was more unsettling. It was late on a Tuesday night, around 11 p.m., about 4 months before the engagement. I had been working in my home office, finishing up a presentation for a client meeting the next morning. Sarah was in our bedroom, supposedly reading before bed. When I finally wrapped up my work and walked into the bedroom, I found her sitting up in bed with her phone, smiling at the screen in a way that made my chest tighten. She was typing rapidly, that small smile playing at her lips, the intimate smile I thought was reserved for me. When she heard me enter, she quickly turned the phone face down on the nightstand and looked up at me with wider eyes. "Hey babe," she said. "Finished with work?" "Yeah," I said, climbing into bed beside her. "Who are you texting? You looked happy." "Oh, just Lauren," she said, referring to her coworker at Vertex Innovations. "She's having drama with her boyfriend again. The usual stuff, he forgot their anniversary, she's upset. You know how it goes." I nodded, but something made me glance at her phone on the nightstand. The screen was dark, but I could have sworn I saw it light up briefly with a notification before she reached over and turned it completely off. Not just locked, turned off entirely. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Of course," she said, snuggling into my side. "Just don't want to be disturbed. I want to focus on you." She initiated intimacy that night with an intensity that felt almost desperate, like she was trying to prove something. Afterward, as she fell asleep in my arms, I stared at the ceiling and told myself I was being paranoid. Sarah loved me. We were building a life together. Trust was everything, but the doubt had planted itself deeper. The third incident happened about 3 months before the engagement, and it's the one that haunts me most because I was so close to understanding what was really happening. I had taken a half-day off work on a Friday to handle some personal errands, getting my car serviced, picking up dry cleaning, that sort of thing. Around 1 p.m., I decided to surprise Sarah at her favorite coffee shop, the Daily Grind in Wicker Park, where she often went for lunch breaks. I parked down the street and walked toward the shop, already imagining her smile when she saw me. But as I approached the large front windows, I froze. Through the glass, I could see Sarah sitting at a corner table, our corner table, where we'd spent so many Saturday mornings together. And sitting across from her was Ethan. That alone wouldn't have stopped me, but it was the way they were sitting. Leaning in close, their faces inches apart, Sarah's hand resting on the table between them. As I watched, Ethan reached out and his fingers brushed against hers. It was brief, barely a touch, but it was intimate in a way that made my stomach drop. Sarah threw her head back laughing at something Ethan said, and the laugh, God, it was the laugh she used to give me. Pure, unguarded joy. Her other hand came up to touch her collarbone, a gesture she made when she was flirting. I knew that gesture intimately because she'd made it on our first date, sitting in that same coffee shop 5 years ago. I should have walked in right then. I should have confronted what I was seeing. But instead, I pulled out my phone and called Sarah's number, watching through the window as she checked her phone and declined my call. Then she leaned back and toward Ethan and continued their conversation. My heart was pounding. Why would she decline my call? Unless she didn't want me to know she was with Ethan? But that didn't make sense. There was nothing wrong with them having coffee together. They were family, or would be soon. I stood there for another minute, watching them, before I finally walked into the shop. The bell above the door chimed, and both of them looked up. Their expressions were identical, surprise, maybe even alarm, quickly covered with broad smiles. "Daniel." Sarah stood up, coming over to kiss me. "What are you doing here?" "Took a half day," I said, looking between them. "What are you guys up to?" "Oh, Ethan wanted some advice about a job interview next week," Sarah explained smoothly. "You know how good I am at interview prep, and you've been so busy with work lately, we didn't want to bother you." Ethan nodded, standing to give me a quick hug. "Yeah, there's this marketing position at a firm downtown. Sarah's been coaching me on how to talk about my career gaps and frame them positively." It made perfect sense. Ethan had been unemployed for a few months, and Sarah was excellent at career coaching. I'd actually suggested a few months ago that she help him polish his resume. This was me being paranoid again, seeing shadows where there was only innocent family support. "That's great," I said, sitting down with them. I bought another round of lattes, and we spent the next 30 minutes talking about interview strategies and job hunting. Sarah and Ethan were both perfectly natural, animated, and helpful. By the time we left, I felt foolish for my earlier suspicions. But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the image of Ethan's fingers brushing Sarah's. The way she declined my call. The intimate lean of their postures. I turned to Sarah, who was reading beside me. "Hey," I said softly. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." She put down her book. "Is everything okay? Between us, I mean?" Her face filled with concern. "What?" "Yes, of course." "Daniel, where is this coming from?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I guess I've been working so much lately. I worry that I'm not giving you enough attention, that maybe you're—" I couldn't even say the word, unhappy. She turned fully toward me, taking both my hands in hers. "Daniel, I love you. You're my person. Yes, you work a lot, but I knew that when we started dating. I'm not going anywhere. You don't need to worry." And then, as if to prove her commitment, she told me she'd been thinking about our future. About taking the next step. About engagement and marriage. My heart soared. Here I was questioning her loyalty, and she was thinking about forever. "I want to marry you, Daniel," she said, her eyes shining. "I want to build a life with you. The whole thing, house, kids, growing old together. You're it for me." I felt ashamed for doubting her. I pulled her into my arms and apologized for being insecure. She held me tight and whispered that she understood, that relationships require trust, and that she would never betray that trust. 2 weeks later, she proposed. The engagement party was Sarah's idea. She wanted to surprise me, she said, by proposing to me in front of all our friends and family at my parents' house in Oak Park. It was unconventional, but that was Sarah, bold, creative, always breaking from tradition. She'd coordinated everything with my mother, the caterer, the decorations, the guest list. Even the weather cooperated, giving us a perfect Saturday evening in May with warm temperatures and clear skies. When I arrived at my parents' house that evening, thinking I was just coming for a casual family dinner, I found the backyard transformed. String lights were draped between the trees, creating a canopy of warm light. There were at least 60 people there, family, friends, colleagues, neighbors. A table was set up with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Music played softly from speakers hidden in the garden. "Surprise!" everyone shouted as I walked through the back gate. I was genuinely confused until Sarah stepped forward, looking beautiful in a blue dress I'd never seen before. She took my hand and led me to the center of the yard, where everyone formed a circle around us. "Daniel," she began, her voice clear and confident, "5 years ago, you sat next to me in Economics 201 and made a terrible joke about supply and demand curves that somehow made me laugh anyway. From that moment, I knew you were special. You're brilliant, kind, supportive, and you make me want to be a better person every single day." My heart was pounding. This couldn't be happening. Was she actually? Sarah got down on one knee, pulling out a small box with a simple gold band inside. "Daniel James Morrison, will you marry me?" The world stopped. Through the roar in my ears, I heard myself say yes. I heard the cheers and applause. I felt Sarah slip the ring on my finger and stand up to kiss me. My mother was crying happy tears. My father clapped me on the back. Friends lined up to congratulate us. And Ethan was right there at the front of the crowd, cheering the loudest. He hugged me tightly, pulling me away from Sarah for a moment. "I'm so happy for you, brother," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I knew you two were meant to be together. This is perfect. You're perfect together." He was crying. My brother was crying with joy at my engagement. How could I have ever doubted him? How could I have suspected anything between him and Sarah? I felt a wave of love for my family, for this moment, for the life I was about to begin. Later that evening, when things had calmed down a bit and people were mingling with drinks, I found myself standing with Ethan near the drinks table. "Thank you," I said to him, "for being here, for being excited for us. I know you and Sarah have gotten close while helping you with job stuff, and I appreciate that you've been such a good friend to her." Ethan's smile flickered for just a second before returning full force. "Of course, man. She's great. You're lucky. We both are," I said, not quite sure what I meant but feeling generous and magnanimous in my happiness. Around 10 p.m., my phone rang. It was James Chun, my colleague at Bridgewater Consulting, calling about an urgent client situation with a manufacturing company in Boston that needed my input on a presentation due Monday morning. The reception inside my parents' house was terrible. It always had been, buried in old oak trees and far from the nearest cell tower. I told James to hold on and stepped outside into the backyard, walking past my mother's rose bushes toward the gazebo at the far end of the property, where I knew the signal was stronger. That's when I saw them. Under the oak tree near the back fence, illuminated by the soft glow of the string lights, Sarah and Ethan were wrapped around each other in an embrace that was anything but brotherly. His hands were buried in her hair, tangled in the dark waves I'd touched just an hour ago when we'd danced to our song. Her arms were around his neck, pulling him closer, her body pressed against his in a way that spoke of familiarity and desperate want. They were kissing with an intensity that made it clear this was not the first time. This was not a drunken mistake or a moment of weakness. This was passion deep and practiced. This was intimacy built over time, in secret, while I'd been planning our future and pushing down my doubts and telling myself I was being paranoid. I don't know how long I stood there frozen, James Chen's voice still buzzing in my ear like a distant insect. 5 seconds? 30? A minute? Time seemed to collapse and expand simultaneously. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't process what my eyes were telling me was real. When they finally pulled apart for air, Ethan's eyes opened and locked directly onto mine. The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. Sarah followed his gaze, turning to look over her shoulder, and I watched her expression shift from ecstasy to confusion to absolute horror in the span of a heartbeat. Daniel, she started, her voice cutting through the night air. But I couldn't hear anything over the roaring in my ears, over the sound of my entire world shattering like glass dropped from a great height. All those moments I'd doubted and dismissed, all those gut feelings I'd ignored, all those signs I'd explained away came crashing back at once with devastating clarity. The laptop snapping shut, the declined phone call, the intimate postures, the brushing fingers. It had all been real. My instincts had been screaming the truth at me for months, and I'd chosen to believe the lie because the truth was too painful to accept. I turned and ran, pushed past the guests who were still celebrating my engagement, past my mother who called out asking if everything was okay, past my father who tried to stop me. I sprinted through the side gate to where my car was parked on the street, fumbled with my keys for what felt like an eternity, while my hands shook uncontrollably. Behind me, I could hear Sarah calling my name, her voice desperate and getting closer, but I couldn't face her. Couldn't face any of them. Couldn't stand there and listen to explanations or excuses, or whatever else they thought they could say to make this make sense. I started the engine and drove. I didn't know where I was going, just that I needed to get away from that house, from those people, from the images that were now burned into my brain like a brand. I drove through red lights, took turns without signaling, narrowly missed other cars. I was barely functioning, operating on pure survival instinct. I ended up at the Marriott near O'Hare Airport. I chose it specifically because it was far from anyone I knew, far from anywhere someone might think to look for me. It was a place where I could disappear completely, become anonymous, cease to exist as the person I'd been just 2 hours ago. I checked in using my corporate card, barely able to form coherent words to the front desk clerk, who looked at me with concern, but was professional enough not to ask questions. In the room, I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my suit from the party, and stared at nothing. The ring Sarah had put on my finger felt like it was burning my skin. My phone started buzzing. First Sarah, then Ethan, then my mother, then my father, then Sarah again. I watched the screen light up over and over, each name a fresh stab of betrayal. I ignored them all, but I couldn't ignore the texts that started coming through. From Ethan, Daniel, please answer. I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen, but I'm in love with her. I have been for over a year. We tried to stop, but we can't. We tried so hard. I'm so sorry, brother. I'm so fucking sorry. Please call me. Let me explain. Over a year. Over a year. Which meant it had started long before any of my suspicions. Which meant every smile, every family dinner, every casual coffee had been a lie. Minutes later, Sarah's message arrived. Daniel, please let me explain. I proposed to you because I thought if I committed fully, if I made that public declaration, I could forget about Ethan. I thought I could force myself to love you the way you deserve to be loved. But after saying yes in front of everyone, after seeing your face and your family's faces, and feeling the weight of that ring on my finger, I realized I was lying to myself and to you. You were never the problem. You're wonderful and kind, and you would have been an amazing husband. But Ethan is the one I want. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. You deserve so much better than what I can give you. I read those messages over and over until the words stopped making sense, until they became just sounds without meaning. She had proposed to me as an experiment, a test to see if public commitment could override her feelings for my brother. I had stood there in front of everyone I loved, believing it was the happiest moment of my life, while she was using me as a tool to get over her affair with Ethan. The proposal hadn't been about love. It had been about desperation, and I had been too blind, too trusting, too stupidly hopeful to see it. I stayed in that hotel room for 5 days. I called in sick to work, ordered room service once a day just to keep myself alive, and mostly stared at the ceiling. My parents called dozens of times. So did my Aunt Rebecca and my cousin Tom. I ignored everyone. On the 6th day, I knew I had to go back to the apartment Sarah and I shared. I had to get my things and figure out the next chapter of my life. I drove back to Lincoln Park on a Thursday afternoon, expecting the apartment to be empty. Instead, I found my entire family there, crowded into our living room. My parents, James and Patricia, my Aunt Rebecca, my grandparents, and Ethan and Sarah, sitting together on the couch, her hand in his. Everyone turned when I walked in. My mother rushed toward me, pulling me into a hug. Daniel, thank God. We've been so worried. We need to talk about this as a family. I felt numb. I'm just here to get my things. Please, son, sit down, my father said, gesturing to the armchair. We need to discuss the situation. There's nothing to discuss, I said flatly. My fiancée and my brother have been having an affair. I'm leaving. Ethan stood up, tears streaming down his face. Daniel, please. I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened. Sarah and I were in love. Real deep love. I know the timing was terrible, but... But what? I interrupted, my voice rising. But you couldn't wait until after my engagement? You couldn't tell me before she proposed to me in front of 60 people. Sarah stood too, wringing her hands. Daniel, I'm already packed. I'm moving in with Ethan. We want to start fresh, do this the right way. I stared at her in disbelief. The right way? You think there's a right way to do this? And then I noticed it. My family members were nodding sympathetically. At Sarah. At Ethan. Not at me. My mother took a deep breath. Daniel, sweetheart, I know this is painful. But we've all talked, and we believe this is for the best. Love isn't something you can control. Ethan and Sarah tried to fight it, but they couldn't. And now that it's out in the open, we need to support them. The room started spinning. Support them? My father cleared his throat. Son, you need to be mature about this. Yes, the situation isn't ideal, but Ethan is your brother. Family is forever. And if Sarah makes him happy, then we should celebrate that. Aunt Rebecca chimed in. Daniel, you're young. You'll find someone else. But Ethan and Sarah, they found something special. Don't you want your brother to be happy? I looked around the room at all these people I'd loved my entire life, and realized they had all chosen a side. And it wasn't mine. Ethan walked over to Sarah and kissed her, right there in front of everyone. Deep, passionate, claiming her. My mother actually smiled through tears, like she was watching a romantic movie. This is disgusting, I said, my voice shaking. You're all acting like this is some beautiful love story. She was my fiancé. He's my brother. This isn't romance, it's betrayal. Don't be selfish, Daniel, my father snapped. You're acting like a child. Your brother has found his soulmate. Be happy for him. That word, selfish, broke something inside me. I packed my belongings that same day and left without another word. From that day on, I cut my family out of my life completely. Over the years, they tried to contact me, birthday wishes, holiday messages, but I ignored them. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard that Marcus and Lucy had married, started a business called Catalyst Creative Partners, and eventually failed miserably. 4 days ago, my mother called from an unfamiliar number, begging for help. Their business had collapsed, investors pulled out, debts piled up, and loan sharks were after them. She asked me for nearly $95,000 to save them. I refused. They lost the right to ask anything of me the day they betrayed me. My mother cried and called me cruel, but I reminded her that no one had cared about my feelings back then. I hung up and blocked my entire family. Things escalated when Ethan showed up at my house, screaming and trying to break in. He demanded I promise to support them financially. Ethan even shoved me when I refused. A week later, my parents came to my house, apologizing. They said seeing Ethan and Sarah's behavior finally opened their eyes. I accepted their apology, but told them it was too late to rebuild what they destroyed. I've unblocked my parents, but I'm not going back to the way things were. I've learned to live my life on my own terms, and that's how it's going to stay. Thank you for watching the video to the end. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. A playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to is now displayed on the screen. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.